The CIA first learned of Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti in 2004, identified him through signals intelligence in 2007, then tracked him for 3 years using satellite imagery and NSA intercepts before realizing he was their golden ticket to bin Laden. This courier had been carrying messages to and from the Al-Qaeda leader, but he was exceptionally careful. He never used phones near his home, drove different routes each time, and changed vehicles regularly. Intelligence officers watched him buy groceries, visit relatives, and live what appeared to be an ordinary life in Pakistan. What they didn't know was that every few weeks, he disappeared behind the walls of a mysterious compound where the world's most wanted man was hiding in plain sight. But to understand why this decade-long manhunt consumed American intelligence agencies, we need to examine the true scope of what bin Laden had unleashed. The updated toll of September 11th. The full scope of destruction reveals itself through numbers that continue growing more than 2 decades later. Nearly 3,000 people were killed on September 11th, with thousands more dying later from 9/11-related illnesses, as the World Trade Center Health Registry documents an expanding circle of casualties. These numbers climb each month as more first responders, survivors, and area residents succumb to cancers, respiratory diseases, and other conditions caused by exposure to the toxic dust cloud that engulfed lower Manhattan. The latest medical studies reveal health impacts that remained hidden for years after the attacks. Among the 91,000 first responders and survivors enrolled in the World Trade Center Health Program, more than 28,000 have developed serious illnesses directly attributed to their 9/11 exposure. Over 1,400 9/11 first responders have died due to ground zero toxins, according to FDNY data. The toxic mixture of pulverized concrete, asbestos, lead paint, jet fuel, and human remains created a perfect storm of carcinogens that medical experts are still studying today. Ground zero cleanup workers, who spent months sifting through debris, have suffered some of the most severe health consequences. Many developed a condition doctors now call World Trade Center cough within weeks of exposure, which has progressed into chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and pulmonary fibrosis in thousands of cases. The dust contained more than 400 different toxic substances, including benzene, dioxins, and microscopic glass particles that lodged permanently in lung tissue. Researchers estimate that exposure to this toxic mixture was equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes daily for several months. The economic calculations have been revised dramatically as economists factor in decades of ongoing costs. The initial estimates of direct economic damage now pale compared to the total financial impact, with an estimated $7 to $8 trillion spent on post-9/11 wars, according to the Costs of War project. The September 11th Victim Compensation Fund has paid out $8.95 billion to families and survivors, but this represents only a fraction of the total economic burden. Healthcare costs alone have consumed more than $47 billion through various federal programs designed to treat 9/11-related illnesses. The James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act, renewed multiple times since 2010, now provides coverage through 2090 to account for the extended latency period of many cancers and diseases. Medical experts predict that 9/11-related health impacts will continue appearing for decades, as some cancers don't manifest until 20 or 30 years after exposure. Recently declassified FBI and CIA documents have revealed planning details that intelligence agencies missed before the attacks. The hijackers conducted training flights in the United States and attended planning meetings in Malaysia, activities that were documented but not properly analyzed until years later. These surveillance activities were captured on airport security cameras but weren't connected to form a complete picture of the emerging threat. The psychological trauma has been measured through longitudinal studies that track mental health impacts across different populations. The National Center for PTSD has documented elevated rates of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder among people who lived or worked near Ground Zero, even if they weren't directly involved in rescue operations. Children who witnessed the attacks on television show measurably higher rates of anxiety disorders as adults, demonstrating how the trauma extended far beyond New York City. Mental health researchers have identified what they call collective trauma, affecting entire communities. Neighborhoods in Lower Manhattan report higher rates of substance abuse, domestic violence, and suicide compared to similar areas that weren't affected by the attacks. The constant smell of burning debris, which persisted for months after September 11th, created lasting associations that trigger anxiety responses in survivors even today. Many first responders struggle with survivor guilt, knowing that 343 of their fellow firefighters and 72 police officers never made it home. The global ripple effects have reshaped international relations in ways that continue influencing world politics today. The attacks triggered NATO's Article 5 for the first time in the alliance's history, creating military commitments that lasted 2 decades in Afghanistan. The subsequent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan resulted in over 900,000 deaths, according to the Watson Institute's Costs of War project. These military interventions destabilized entire regions and created refugee crises that still affect European and Middle Eastern politics. Immigration and border security policies implemented after September 11th have processed more than 2.1 billion travelers through enhanced screening procedures since 2001. The Department of Homeland Security has spent $791 billion on various security programs, fundamentally changing how Americans travel, work in federal buildings, and interact with law enforcement. These security measures have prevented numerous terrorist plots, but have also raised ongoing debates about privacy rights and government surveillance powers. International cooperation in counterterrorism has created new intelligence-sharing partnerships between 76 countries, leading to the disruption of more than 3,400 terrorist plots worldwide since 2001. However, these same security relationships have complicated diplomatic relations, as revelations about surveillance programs have strained alliances with traditional partners. The balance between security and civil liberties remains contentious in democratic societies around the world. Understanding the full magnitude of September 11th's impact explains why capturing Osama bin Laden became far more than a simple matter of justice. Each new study revealing additional health consequences, each family receiving a late-onset cancer diagnosis, each $1 billion spent on ongoing medical care and security measures reinforced the urgency of the manhunt. The attacks weren't just a single day of violence, but an ongoing catastrophe that continued claiming lives and consuming resources year after year. The expanding circle of victims and the mounting costs transformed bin Laden from a terrorist leader into the architect of America's most expensive disaster. Every policy change, every security checkpoint, every medical treatment for a sick first responder connected back to his decision to attack the United States. This growing awareness of September 11th's true scope would drive intelligence agencies to pursue him with unprecedented resources and determination. But first they had to confront the shocking reality of how their own failures had made the attacks possible. The intelligence revolution born from failure. The FBI had identified 2 of the 9/11 hijackers, Khalid al-Midhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, as suspected terrorists in August 2001, but failed to locate them before they boarded American Airlines Flight 77. The CIA had tracked these men since a January 2000 Al-Qaeda meeting in Malaysia, but never shared this information with domestic law enforcement agencies. Immigration records showed al-Midhar had entered the United States multiple times using his real name, while al-Hazmi lived openly in San Diego for nearly 2 years. The 2 agencies operated under legal restrictions that prevented intelligence sharing, creating blind spots that the hijackers exploited perfectly. Internal investigations revealed that at least 12 different opportunities existed to disrupt the 9/11 plot if information had been shared properly between agencies. The CIA knew about the Malaysia meeting, the FBI had reports about suspicious flight training, the NSA had intercepted communications mentioning an upcoming attack, and immigration officials had flagged visa irregularities. Each agency possessed pieces of the puzzle, but none could see the complete picture. This compartmentalization, originally designed to protect sources and methods, had become a fatal weakness that allowed 19 men to coordinate the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. Congress responded by creating the Department of Homeland Security in November 2002, consolidating 22 federal agencies with 180,000 employees under a single cabinet-level department. The Transportation Security Administration absorbed airport security from private contractors. The Coast Guard moved from the Department of Transportation, the Secret Service transferred from Treasury, and Immigration and Naturalization split into separate enforcement and services bureaus. FEMA, which had operated independently since 1979, became part of the new department along with the Federal Protective Service, Customs Service, and Border Patrol. This massive reorganization directly impacted the bin Laden manhunt by creating new information-sharing mechanisms between agencies that had previously operated in isolation. The Terrorist Screening Database, launched in 2003, combined watch lists from the FBI, CIA, State Department, and other agencies into a single system accessible to airport security, border agents, and local police. For the first time, a suspicious financial transaction flagged by Treasury analysts could immediately alert CIA operatives tracking the same individual overseas. The creation of fusion centers in major cities allowed federal agencies to share intelligence with state and local law enforcement in real time. These centers proved crucial in tracking potential bin Laden associates who might seek medical treatment, send money transfers, or make contact with family members in the United States. When Pakistani intelligence provided tips about suspicious individuals, federal agents could now coordinate with local police departments to conduct surveillance or make arrests within hours rather than weeks. The USA Patriot Act, passed just 6 weeks after September 11th, expanded surveillance authorities that became essential tools in the bin Laden hunt. Section 215 allowed the FBI to obtain business records from telecommunications companies, banks, and internet service providers without showing probable cause of criminal activity. This authority enabled investigators to map the financial networks that supported Al-Qaeda operations and identify previously unknown associates of bin Laden's inner circle. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act received significant amendments that allowed intelligence agencies to monitor electronic communications between the United States and foreign countries with reduced judicial oversight. These expanded powers proved particularly valuable when tracking couriers and financial operatives who maintained contact with bin Laden's hideout. Previously, each international phone call or email required individual court approval, creating delays that often rendered intelligence worthless in fast-moving operations. National security letters became a powerful tool for gathering information about suspected terrorists without alerting targets to ongoing investigations. FBI agents could now compel banks, phone companies, and internet providers to turn over customer records simply by asserting the information was relevant to national security. Between 2003 and 2011, the FBI issued more than 192,000 national security letters, many related to tracking bin Laden's network and identifying potential threats to homeland security. The CIA and NSA began unprecedented cooperation after decades of bureaucratic rivalry and legal restrictions. The two agencies established joint task forces focused specifically on high-value targets like bin Laden, sharing personnel, resources, and intelligence in ways that would have been impossible before September 11th. CIA operatives gained access to NSA's global communications intercepts, while NSA analysts received CIA human intelligence reports that provided context for electronic surveillance. This collaboration proved essential when tracking Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, bin Laden's primary courier. NSA intercepts identified suspicious communication patterns, while CIA sources provided details about al-Kuwaiti's role in the Al-Qaeda network. The agencies worked together to monitor his movements across Pakistan, eventually leading to the Abbottabad compound. Without the post-9/11 intelligence reforms, this level of coordination would have been legally and bureaucratically impossible. The failure at Tora Bora in December 2001 exposed critical weaknesses in special operations planning and intelligence coordination. Requests to seal escape routes with U.S. troops were denied, leaving tribal proxies who sometimes switched sides when paid. Afghan warlords were paid to block exits, but lack of enforcement let bin Laden slip away. The Tora Bora outcome led to the creation of JSOC Joint Task Forces and new Special Operations Authority. Enhanced interrogation techniques applied to captured Al-Qaeda operatives provided controversial but significant intelligence about bin Laden's Courier network. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the 9/11 mastermind captured in 2003, revealed details about Al-Qaeda's communication methods under harsh questioning. Abu Faraj al-Libi, arrested in 2005, provided information about courier identities that proved crucial in later tracking efforts. While these techniques remain legally and ethically disputed, they contributed intelligence that helped identify key figures in bin Laden's support network. The institutional changes implemented after September 11 created an intelligence apparatus specifically designed to track elusive targets like bin Laden across international boundaries. Information that once took weeks to share between agencies now moved in real time through secure networks. Local police officers had access to terrorist watch lists, while CIA operatives could request immediate surveillance of suspicious individuals anywhere in the United States. However, bin Laden recognized that American intelligence capabilities had evolved dramatically after September 11. He stopped using satellite phones, avoided electronic communications, and relied entirely on trusted couriers for messages. Understanding his transformation from wealthy Saudi businessman to the world's most hunted fugitive would prove essential in predicting where and how he might hide. The making of the world's most wanted man bin Laden came from a wealthy construction family in Saudi Arabia, which funded early operations. His father Mohammed bin Laden had built a construction empire worth billions through exclusive contracts with the Saudi royal family, and when Osama inherited approximately $25 million after his father's death in 1967, he gained access to far more than money. The family business maintained offices across the Middle East with established relationships among government officials, military contractors, and religious institutions throughout the region. These connections would prove invaluable when he later needed to move money, purchase weapons, and recruit fighters. He adopted radical jihadist ideas in his 20s and used family wealth to finance mujahideen in Afghanistan. When Soviet forces invaded Afghanistan in December 1979, bin Laden saw an opportunity to transform his beliefs into action. He arrived in Pakistan in 1980, initially working to establish the Maktab al-Khidmat, which recruited Arab volunteers to fight alongside Afghan mujahideen. His construction expertise became his greatest asset as he built training camps, weapons storage facilities, and mountain hideouts for Arab fighters. His engineers carved elaborate cave complexes into the mountains near the Pakistani border, creating fortified positions that could withstand Soviet bombing campaigns. The Soviet-Afghan War taught bin Laden crucial lessons about asymmetric warfare that he would later apply against American forces. He learned how small groups of dedicated fighters could defeat a technologically superior enemy through patience, mobility, and knowledge of local terrain. He observed how effective propaganda could inspire international support and recruit new fighters. Most importantly, he discovered that targeting enemy morale and economic resources could be more effective than direct military confrontation. The Mujahideen victory over the Soviet Union convinced him that similar tactics could succeed against other superpowers. His relationship with the Saudi royal family deteriorated after Iraq invaded Kuwait in August 1990. When King Fahd invited American troops to defend Saudi Arabia, bin Laden offered to mobilize his Arab-Afghan veterans instead. He argued that stationing non-Muslim forces near Islam's holiest sites violated religious law and would provoke widespread anger throughout the Muslim world. The royal family rejected his proposal and accepted American military protection, a decision that bin Laden viewed as betrayal of Islamic principles. His public criticism of this policy led to government surveillance and eventual exile. Saudi authorities stripped bin Laden of his citizenship in 1994 after he continued attacking government policies from his base in Sudan. The royal family also froze his access to family business accounts and pressured other wealthy Saudis to stop funding his activities. This financial pressure forced him to become more creative about raising money through criminal enterprises, charitable front organizations, and sympathetic businessmen across the Middle East. His exile from Saudi Arabia transformed him from a domestic critic into an international terrorist leader with nothing left to lose. Sudan provided bin Laden with a perfect environment to build Al-Qaeda's international network between 1991 and 1996. The government welcomed him as a wealthy investor who could help develop the country's infrastructure. Bin Laden established legitimate businesses including construction companies, agricultural farms, and import-export operations that generated profits while providing cover for terrorist activities. His construction company built roads and airports that improved his ability to move fighters and weapons throughout the region. His agricultural operations in eastern Sudan became training camps where recruits learned bomb-making, weapons handling, and operational security. During his Sudan years, bin Laden began recruiting operatives from across the Muslim world and establishing cells in multiple countries. He sent representatives to establish operations in Somalia, Yemen, Kenya, Tanzania, and other strategic locations. His network provided weapons and training to local insurgent groups while identifying potential targets for future attacks. The 1993 World Trade Center bombing, carried out by associates trained in his camps, demonstrated Al-Qaeda's ability to strike inside the United States. International pressure forced Sudan to expel bin Laden in May 1996, leading to his fateful decision to return to Afghanistan. The Taliban leadership, grateful for his financial support during their rise to power, provided him with protection in exchange for continued funding and military assistance. Bin Laden established new training camps in remote provinces and began planning more ambitious attacks against American interests worldwide. His agreement with Taliban leader Mullah Omar created a terrorist sanctuary that would shelter him for the next 5 years. The 1998 embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania marked bin Laden's emergence as America's primary terrorist threat. His operatives spent months conducting surveillance of both targets, identifying security weaknesses and planning coordinated truck bomb attacks. The simultaneous explosions killed 224 people and wounded more than 4,000 others, demonstrating Al-Qaeda's capability to execute complex international operations. These bombings prompted the first serious American efforts to capture or kill bin Laden. The USS Cole attack in October 2000 served as the final rehearsal for September 11th. Bin Laden's operatives spent nearly 2 years preparing this operation, establishing a safe house in Aden, purchasing a small boat, and testing various explosive devices. The suicide bombing killed 17 American sailors and nearly sank a billion-dollar warship, proving that Al-Qaeda could strike military targets despite heavy security. Bin Laden's media strategy transformed him into a global symbol of anti-American resistance. His carefully staged video messages, distributed through Al Jazeera and other outlets, portrayed him as a warrior poet defending Islam against Western aggression. He wore simple white robes and spoke in classical Arabic, projecting an image of religious authority that appealed to Muslims worldwide. His ability to evade capture despite massive manhunts enhanced his legendary status and inspired countless followers to join his cause. This detailed understanding of bin Laden's background, motivations, and operational methods would prove essential when intelligence analysts later tried to predict his behavior in hiding. His preference for remote, mountainous terrain reflected his Afghan war experience. His reliance on trusted associates from his early radical days explained his courier networks. His engineering expertise in building fortified cave complexes would soon be tested when American forces finally cornered him in Afghanistan's most forbidden terrain. The December 2001 operation at Tora Bora would become the most consequential missed opportunity in the entire manhunt. On December 3, 2001, American intelligence intercepted radio communications indicating that Osama bin Laden was trapped inside the Tora Bora cave complex in eastern Afghanistan, approximately 35 miles southwest of Jalalabad near the Pakistani border. Delta Force operators and British Special Air Service troops had tracked Al-Qaeda fighters to this remote mountain fortress after weeks of pursuit across Afghanistan's rugged terrain. For the first time since September 11th, American forces had their primary target cornered in a confined area with limited escape routes. The Tora Bora region consists of a series of steep ridges and deep valleys rising from 8,000 to 14,000 feet above sea level, creating natural fortifications that had protected fighters for centuries. The White Mountains contained hundreds of caves and tunnels carved into solid rock by geological forces and human engineering. Snow covers the peaks for most of the year, while the valleys below freeze solid during winter months. Bin Laden had spent considerable time and money fortifying this area during the 1980s war against Soviet forces, expanding natural caves into an elaborate underground complex capable of sheltering hundreds of fighters. American military planners faced a crucial decision about how to assault this mountain fortress. General Tommy Franks, commanding Operation Enduring Freedom, chose to rely primarily on Afghan militia forces rather than committing large numbers of American ground troops. The Pentagon provided these local commanders with cash payments, weapons, and close air support, but Afghan fighters would conduct the actual ground assault. This strategy aimed to minimize American casualties while leveraging local knowledge of the terrain, but it placed the success of the operation in the hands of unreliable allies. Declassified military documents reveal intense debates among American commanders about troop deployment during the Tora Bora operation. Colonel John Mulholland, leading Special Forces operations in Afghanistan, requested 800 Army Rangers to block escape routes into Pakistan. General Franks rejected this request, citing logistical challenges and political concerns about large-scale American ground operations. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld supported Franks' decision, believing that Afghan forces would be more effective in mountain warfare. CIA operatives on the ground strongly disagreed with this approach. Gary Berntsen, the CIA field commander at Tora Bora, repeatedly requested additional American troops to seal the border with Pakistan. His team had identified at least 6 major trails that bin Laden could use to escape, but Afghan militia forces lacked the discipline and motivation to maintain effective roadblocks. Berntsen's reports to CIA headquarters described Afghan commanders as unreliable partners who might switch sides if offered sufficient bribes by fleeing Al-Qaeda fighters. The bombing campaign that began on December 4, 2001, featured persistent airstrikes by B-52s and AC-130 gunships targeting suspected cave positions. Each B-52 carried massive payloads of ordnance, including bunker-busting bombs designed to penetrate deep underground fortifications. A US C-130 delivered a 15,000-pound Blue 82 Daisy Cutter, marking a rare usage of this massive conventional weapon. The continuous bombardment created avalanches that sealed some cave entrances but failed to eliminate the primary targets hiding in the deepest sections of the complex. The bombing proved less effective than expected because the cave system extended much deeper into the mountains than intelligence reports indicated. Many tunnels connected to natural caverns that provided protection from even the largest bombs. Al-Qaeda fighters had learned from Soviet bombing campaigns during the 1980s and constructed their shelters to withstand sustained aerial attacks. They moved constantly between different cave sections, using the underground network to avoid detection while maintaining communication through radio systems. Complex tribal politics and paid proxies left gaps for bin Laden's escape with no new troops to seal the border. Afghan militia commanders accepted payments from both American forces and fleeing Al-Qaeda fighters, creating conflicting loyalties that undermined the entire operation. Hazrat Ali, one of the primary Afghan commanders, received millions in cash from the CIA, but also negotiated separate deals with Al-Qaeda leaders seeking safe passage to Pakistan. Different militia groups had fought each other for years over control of lucrative smuggling routes, and some commanders viewed the operation as an opportunity to eliminate rivals rather than capture terrorists. Pakistan's failure to secure its side of the border proved decisive in bin Laden's escape. Despite promises to President Bush, Pakistani military forces made no serious effort to establish roadblocks or patrol the remote mountain passes leading from Tora Bora. The federally administered tribal areas operated under traditional tribal law rather than central government control, making effective border security nearly impossible. Local tribal leaders, many with long-standing relationships to Al-Qaeda fighters, provided guides and safe houses for fleeing terrorists. Pakistani intelligence services maintained complex relationships with various Islamic militant groups that created additional obstacles to border security. The Inter-Services Intelligence Agency had supported the Taliban during their rise to power and maintained contacts with Al-Qaeda associates even after September 11th. Some ISI officers viewed American military operations in Afghanistan as temporary interventions that would eventually end, making cooperation with radical groups a long-term strategic necessity. The Tora Bora failure fundamentally changed how American forces approached subsequent high-value target operations. Future missions would rely primarily on American Special Operations Forces rather than local proxies. Intelligence gathering would focus more heavily on escape routes and potential safe havens. Coordination with foreign governments would require specific commitments rather than general promises of cooperation. By mid-December 2001, intercepted communications from the Tora Bora region had gone silent. The world's most wanted man had vanished without a trace, beginning a period that would test every assumption American intelligence agencies held about tracking elusive targets across international boundaries. The ghost years in Pakistan. Intelligence agencies found themselves hunting a target who had mastered the art of invisibility. After vanishing from Tora Bora in mid-December 2001, Osama bin Laden entered what intelligence analysts now call his ghost years, a period from 2002 to 2005 when his whereabouts remained completely unknown to American authorities. The CIA received no reliable intelligence about his location during this time, while Pakistani officials claimed they had no knowledge of his presence in their territory. Satellite surveillance, electronic intercepts, and human intelligence networks all failed to produce actionable leads about the world's most wanted man. He had effectively disappeared into Pakistan's vast tribal regions, protected by a network of supporters who kept his location secret for years. False reports of bin Laden's death circulated regularly during this period, creating confusion within intelligence agencies and providing cover for his continued survival. Funeral ceremony rumors emerged repeatedly, with Pakistani sources claiming he had died of kidney failure in remote tribal areas. CNN and other major news outlets published these reports before intelligence agencies could verify their accuracy. Similar death rumors emerged in 2003, 2004, and 2005, each citing different causes ranging from bombing injuries to natural illness. These false reports served bin Laden's interests by reducing the intensity of search efforts and allowing him to move more freely. A 2002 Al Jazeera video confirmed he was alive months after September 11th. His propaganda videos, released sporadically through Al Jazeera and other media outlets, provided the only confirmed evidence of his survival during the ghost years. These recordings showed a noticeably aged bin Laden speaking about current events, proving he remained alive and engaged with global affairs. Intelligence analysts studied each video frame by frame, analyzing background details, lighting conditions, and audio quality for clues about his location. The videos were clearly produced in controlled indoor environments rather than cave complexes, suggesting he had found more comfortable accommodations than expected. Bin Laden most likely spent his first years in hiding, moving between safe houses in Pakistan's federally administered tribal areas, particularly in North and South Waziristan. These mountainous regions along the Afghan border operated under traditional tribal law rather than Pakistani government control, making them ideal sanctuaries for fugitives. Local Pashtun tribes had provided shelter to Afghan Mujahideen fighters during the Soviet War and maintained sympathetic attitudes toward Al-Qaeda leadership. The terrain consisted of steep valleys and remote villages accessible only by narrow mountain paths, allowing small groups to move undetected. The network protecting bin Laden during this period included veteran Arab fighters from the Afghan War, Pakistani tribal leaders, and sympathetic elements within Pakistan's intelligence services. These supporters provided safe houses, transportation, communications equipment, and medical care while maintaining strict operational security. Bin Laden traveled with a small entourage that included his wives, children, and most trusted bodyguards. The group moved frequently between different locations, never staying in one place for more than a few weeks to avoid detection by American surveillance efforts. ISI warned bin Laden was deceased but continued to harbor him, leaving CIA to hunt him across Pakistan. President Pervez Musharraf publicly supported American counterterrorism operations while privately allowing Pakistani intelligence to maintain relationships with militant groups. This dual policy created confusion within Pakistan's security apparatus and provided cover for officers who chose to protect Al-Qaeda leaders. American officials repeatedly pressed Musharraf for more aggressive action against terrorist safe havens, but Pakistani military operations in the tribal areas remained limited and often ineffective. These political constraints allowed bin Laden's network to operate with relative impunity during his early years in hiding. Bin Laden likely lived in several different locations during the ghost years, adapting his security measures based on changing threat levels and local conditions. Intelligence reports suggest he spent time in the Courier agency near the Afghan border, where his Arab fighters had established training camps during the 1980s. He may have also hidden in remote areas of Balochistan province, where vast desert regions and sparse population provided natural concealment. Some reports place him in urban areas like Peshawar or Quetta, where he could blend into large populations of Afghan refugees and religious students. The security measures bin Laden adopted during this period reflected lessons learned from years of evading capture. He stopped using any form of electronic communication, including satellite phones, radios, and internet connections that could be intercepted by American surveillance systems. All messages were carried by trusted couriers who traveled circuitous routes and used coded language to disguise their contents. He changed his appearance by dyeing his beard and wearing different styles of clothing to avoid recognition. His movements followed no predictable patterns, and he avoided locations where he might encounter Pakistani security forces or American operatives. American and Pakistani cooperation in searching for bin Laden produced several near misses during the ghost years that came tantalizingly close to success. In March 2004, Pakistani forces surrounded a compound in South Waziristan based on intelligence suggesting bin Laden's presence, but the target turned out to be Ayman al-Zawahiri's deputy instead. A similar operation in 2005 targeted a house in Bajur Agency where bin Laden had allegedly been spotted, but the building was empty when troops arrived. These failures highlighted the challenges of operating in remote terrain with unreliable local intelligence. Declassified CIA documents reveal that American intelligence agencies tracked dozens of false leads during this period, each requiring significant resources to investigate and verify. Reports came from Pakistani informants seeking reward money, rival tribal leaders attempting to eliminate enemies, and well-meaning civilians who mistook other Arab men for bin Laden. The CIA spent millions of dollars following these leads, conducting surveillance operations and organizing raids that ultimately proved fruitless. Each false alarm made Pakistani officials more skeptical of American intelligence and less willing to authorize future operations. Bin Laden's extreme paranoia about American surveillance capabilities inadvertently provided intelligence agencies with valuable insights into his operational methods and psychological profile. His refusal to use electronic communications confirmed that he remained actively engaged in leading Al-Qaeda operations despite his isolation. His reliance on courier networks revealed the importance of tracking his most trusted associates from the Afghan war period. His apparent need to remain in contact with his family suggested he would not venture far from Pakistan's main population centers for extended periods. By late 2004, the constant movement and security pressures were taking their toll on bin Laden and his family. The stress of perpetual relocation, combined with his desire to provide stability for his wives and children, would soon force him to make a decision that prioritized comfort over operational security. The Abbottabad compound construction. In late 2004, bin Laden made the fateful decision to establish a permanent base of operations. After 3 years of constant movement through Pakistan's tribal regions, he instructed his most trusted courier, Abbottabad al-Kuwaiti, to find a location where they could build a secure compound. This choice represented a fundamental shift in bin Laden's security strategy, trading the mobility that had kept him safe since escaping Tora Bora for the comfort and operational advantages of a fixed location. Abbottabad al-Kuwaiti began searching for suitable properties in early 2005, focusing on areas within driving distance of Islamabad, but far enough from the capital to avoid government scrutiny. Abbottabad, a hill station 60 miles northeast of Islamabad, offered the perfect combination of accessibility and anonymity. The city served as home to Pakistan's premier military academy and hosted a large population of retired military officials, creating an environment where security-conscious residents would not attract unusual attention. Al-Kuwaiti posed as a successful businessman looking for investment property, allowing him to examine multiple locations without raising suspicions. The land purchase transaction in late 2005 raised several red flags that local authorities failed to investigate at the time. Al-Kuwaiti paid around $48,000 for 3 adjoining lots, a sum worth considerably more in today's currency when adjusted for inflation and local economic conditions. This represented an unusually high price for undeveloped property in a middle-class neighborhood, particularly given that most residents earned modest government salaries. The seller, a local landowner named Shah Khan, later told investigators that Al-Kuwaiti carried the money in large denomination bills and completed the entire transaction within a single afternoon meeting. Construction began immediately after the land purchase, with Al-Kuwaiti hiring local contractors and laborers who had no knowledge of the project's true purpose. The workers understood they were building a large family compound for a wealthy businessman who valued privacy and security. Muhammad Bashir, the primary contractor, later recalled that Al-Kuwaiti insisted on specific design features that seemed unusual for a residential property. The 2-meter walls topped with razor wire puzzled local architect who questioned why a family residence required such extreme security measures. The compound's construction revealed security features that protected the inhabitants while simultaneously creating the distinctive characteristics that would eventually attract satellite surveillance. The main building contained 3 stories with reinforced concrete walls and reinforced cavities designed for additional protection. Windows were positioned high on the walls and fitted with specialized window film that prevented anyone from seeing inside while allowing residents to observe the surrounding area. The compound included 2 separate residential buildings connected by covered walkways, allowing movement between structures without exposure to overhead surveillance. The completed compound sat at 1,420 yards southwest of Pakistan Military Academy, close enough to benefit from the area's military presence, but far enough to avoid routine security patrols. Multiple families moved into the compound in 2006, creating a complex domestic arrangement that balanced bin Laden's traditional family values with operational security requirements. Bin Laden lived with his youngest wife, Amal al-Sadr, and their children in the main building's top floor, while his son Khalid occupied the second floor with his own family. Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti and his brother Abrar lived in the smaller guest house with their wives and children, serving as the compound's primary security team and maintaining contact with the outside world. Daily life within the compound walls followed strict routines designed to minimize the risk of detection while providing some semblance of normal family existence. The residents woke before dawn for morning prayers, ate meals together in designated areas, and spent most daylight hours indoors to avoid satellite surveillance. Children attended informal lessons taught by their mothers and played in the compound's central courtyard, but they were forbidden from leaving the property or interacting with neighborhood children. This isolation protected operational security but created psychological stress, particularly for the younger family members who had never known life outside the compound walls. The compound's unusual features gradually attracted attention from neighbors and local officials who noticed discrepancies between the property's apparent wealth and its residents' secretive behavior. The buildings remained unconnected to the local electrical grid despite the compound's obvious prosperity, suggesting the residents preferred to use private generators rather than register with utility companies. Garbage from the compound was burned internally rather than collected by municipal services, eliminating another potential source of information about the inhabitants. These seemingly minor security measures created patterns that intelligence analysts would later recognize as indicators of suspicious activity. Agricultural activities within the compound represented attempts to create self-sufficiency while maintaining the appearance of normal domestic life. The residents cultivated vegetable gardens in the courtyard and kept chickens and rabbits to provide fresh food without requiring frequent trips to local markets. A small greenhouse allowed year-round cultivation of herbs and vegetables, reducing dependence on outside suppliers who might ask questions about the compound's unusual food requirements. Bin Laden remained for 5 to 6 years until 2011, creating the longest period of stability he had experienced since fleeing Afghanistan. His children, particularly his younger sons and daughters born after 2001, knew no other life than the compound's confined existence. They received religious education from their mothers and played games in the central courtyard, but they never attended school, visited friends, or participated in community activities that Pakistani children normally enjoyed. The decision to build a permanent hideout represented the beginning of the intelligence trail that would eventually lead to Bin Laden's discovery. The construction project involved dozens of local workers who remembered details about the compound's unusual features. The property transactions created official records that connected al-Kuwaiti to the location. Most importantly, the fixed location eliminated the mobility that had protected Bin Laden during his ghost years, making him vulnerable to the patient surveillance methods that American intelligence agencies had spent years developing. What they needed now was a way to connect this suspicious compound to their primary target. And that breakthrough would come from an unexpected source. Intelligence breakthroughs rarely come from single revelations, but from piecing together fragments of information collected over years of patient investigation. The key to finding Bin Laden emerged from interrogations of Al-Qaeda prisoners held at Guantanamo Bay and other detention facilities around the world. Between 2002 and 2007, CIA interrogators extracted fragments of information about Bin Laden's communication methods from dozens of captured operatives. Most detainees provided false information or remained silent under questioning, but occasionally someone would reveal a detail that proved valuable years later. The interrogators learned that Bin Laden had stopped using electronic communications entirely after September 11th, relying instead on a small network of trusted couriers to carry messages between his hideout and Al-Qaeda cells worldwide. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the 9/11 mastermind captured in Pakistan in March 2003, became a crucial source of intelligence about Bin Laden's courier network during his harsh interrogation sessions. KSM, as intelligence officers called him, initially provided false names and misleading information about the courier system. Under continued questioning, he eventually admitted that Bin Laden relied on a courier known by the nickname Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, though he claimed this individual was relatively unimportant and had not been seen for years. Intelligence analysts recognized that KSM was trying to downplay al-Kuwaiti's significance, which actually confirmed the Courier's importance to bin Laden's operations. Abu Faraj al-Libi, captured in Pakistan in May 2005, provided additional details about the Courier network that corroborated KSM's reluctant admissions. Al-Libi served as Al-Qaeda's operational commander after KSM's arrest and maintained direct contact with bin Laden through the Courier system. During interrogation, he also tried to minimize al-Kuwaiti's role, claiming the Courier had retired from active operations. However, al-Libi inadvertently revealed that al-Kuwaiti was one of the few people bin Laden trusted with sensitive communications, making him a prime target for surveillance efforts. The CIA spent nearly 4 years trying to identify al-Kuwaiti's real name and location based on these fragmentary clues from detainee interrogations. Intelligence analysts cross-referenced phone records, financial transactions, and travel documents from across the Middle East and South Asia, looking for patterns that might reveal the Courier's identity. They discovered that several different aliases had been used by the same individual, including Ibrahim Saeed Ahmed and Arshad Khan, but establishing his true identity required matching fingerprints and photographs from multiple sources. The breakthrough came in 2007 when NSA analysts identified a phone call placed by someone using al-Kuwaiti's real name, Ibrahim Saeed Ahmed. The call was intercepted by Signals intelligence systems monitoring communications in Pakistan's tribal regions. Although the conversation lasted only a few minutes and used coded language, voice analysis confirmed that the speaker matched recordings of al-Kuwaiti from earlier intercepts. This represented the first confirmed communication from the Courier in several years and provided NSA with a phone number to monitor for future contacts. Tracking al-Kuwaiti's movements required sophisticated surveillance techniques that avoided alerting him to the ongoing investigation. The CIA established a joint task force with Pakistani intelligence to monitor the Courier's activities without conducting obvious surveillance that might scare him into changing his communication methods. Pakistani agents followed al-Kuwaiti during his trips to Peshawar and other cities, documenting his meetings and purchases while maintaining enough distance to avoid detection. The surveillance team noted that al-Kuwaiti followed elaborate security protocols, changing vehicles frequently and taking circuitous routes that suggested he was protecting something valuable. Al-Kuwaiti's extreme security consciousness actually helped intelligence analysts confirm his importance to bin Laden's network. The Courier never used his phone near his home address, instead driving to different locations each time he needed to make calls. He purchased supplies from various markets rather than establishing relationships with regular vendors who might remember him. His vehicles were registered under false names, and he paid for everything in cash to avoid creating financial records. These security measures, while protecting his identity, created behavioral patterns that intelligence analysts could study and predict. CIA combined detainee insights with satellite imagery to focus on Courier Abu Ahmed's Abbottabad location by August 2010. Pakistani agents followed al-Kuwaiti to his home in Abbottabad, rather than losing him in the heavy traffic of Peshawar as had happened on previous occasions. The agents maintained surveillance from a distance and photographed the large compound where al-Kuwaiti disappeared behind high walls. Initial intelligence reports described the property as unusually secure for a middle-class neighborhood, with 12-foot walls topped with barbed wire and no visible internet or phone connections. Satellite surveillance of the Abbottabad compound began immediately after its identification. High-resolution images revealed architectural details that raised additional suspicions about the property's inhabitants. The compound was significantly larger than neighboring houses and included multiple buildings connected by covered walkways. Most unusually, the residents burned their trash rather than putting it out for municipal collection, and they had no internet or landline phone connections despite the compound's obvious prosperity. These features suggested inhabitants who valued privacy and security above convenience. The CIA established a safe house in Abbottabad to conduct ground surveillance of the compound without alerting its residents. Intelligence operatives rented a building with clear sight lines to the target property and began documenting the daily routines of everyone living inside. They observed that residents rarely left the compound, and when they did venture outside, they wore traditional Pakistani clothing and avoided contact with neighbors. The surveillance team noted that one tall individual walked regularly in the compound's courtyard for exercise, but never left the property, leading to speculation that this might be a high-value target in hiding. By early 2011, confidence in compound identification surpassed 80% among senior analysts. Intelligence officials concluded that they had assembled the strongest case for bin Laden's location since Tora Bora, even without absolute confirmation of his presence. The circumstantial evidence had reached a threshold that demanded action, but the decision about what kind of action would require presidential authorization and careful consideration of multiple military options. Operation Neptune Spear planning. President Obama received his first detailed briefing about the Abbottabad compound on March 14, 2011, when CIA Director Leon Panetta presented satellite photographs and surveillance reports suggesting bin Laden's presence at the mysterious Pakistani hideout. The president studied the intelligence for nearly an hour, asking pointed questions about the evidence and the certainty of their assessment. Obama wanted to know the probability that bin Laden was actually inside the compound, but intelligence officials could only estimate their confidence level at somewhere between 30 and 80%. The president understood that authorizing military action based on circumstantial evidence carried enormous risks, including the potential destruction of America's relationship with Pakistan and the possibility of killing innocent civilians in a mistaken raid. The National Security Council spent the following weeks analyzing 3 distinct military options for dealing with the suspected bin Laden hideout. Options considered included bombing versus commando raid versus Pakistan cross-border operation. The first option involved a massive bombing campaign using B-2 stealth bombers to drop precision-guided bombs on the compound, guaranteeing the destruction of everyone inside, but also eliminating any possibility of confirming bin Laden's death or recovering valuable intelligence materials. The second option called for a smaller precision strike using drone-fired missiles, which would cause less collateral damage but might allow targets to escape if they survived the initial impact. The third option proposed a joint raid with Pakistani special forces, which would maintain diplomatic relations but risked alerting bin Laden if Pakistani intelligence services warned him about the impending operation. American officials had serious concerns about Pakistan's reliability, given evidence that some Pakistani intelligence officers maintained relationships with Al-Qaeda associates. A unilateral American special operations raid using Navy SEALs offered the best chance of confirming bin Laden's identity and collecting intelligence, but required violating Pakistani sovereignty and risked creating a diplomatic crisis if the mission failed. Obama chose SEAL assault for confirmation and intelligence retrieval, despite diplomatic costs. The ground assault would allow positive identification of any high-value targets killed during the operation, while also providing opportunities to collect computers, documents, and other materials that might reveal information about future terrorist plots. The president was particularly concerned about confirming bin Laden's death, since previous false reports had damaged American credibility. A ground operation would also minimize civilian casualties compared to bombing options that might kill neighboring families. Admiral William McRaven, commander of Joint Special Operations Command, began detailed planning for the raid in early April 2011. McRaven selected operators from SEAL Team 6, officially known as the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, because of their extensive experience in similar high-risk missions. The team had conducted hundreds of raids in Iraq and Afghanistan, developing expertise in rapid building clearing operations and helicopter insertion techniques. McRaven chose 23 SEALs for the mission, along with a military working dog and additional support personnel who would remain with the helicopters during the compound assault. The SEALs conducted intensive training exercises at a replica compound constructed at a classified facility in North Carolina. The training site replicated every detail of the Abbottabad target, including the exact dimensions of buildings, the height of walls, and the locations of doors and windows based on satellite imagery and ground surveillance reports. The operators practiced the mission repeatedly under different conditions, including nighttime operations with night vision equipment and scenarios involving mechanical failures or armed resistance from compound residents. The training revealed several potential complications that required additional planning and specialized equipment. The compound's high walls would require long ropes for the SEALs to rappel from helicopters, while the multiple buildings meant the assault team would need to clear several structures simultaneously. The operators practiced medical treatment procedures for wounded teammates and rehearsed methods for destroying sensitive equipment if the mission encountered serious problems. They also trained for various extraction scenarios, including the possibility that helicopters might be damaged during the operation. Obama wrestled with the diplomatic implications of conducting the raid without informing Pakistani officials beforehand. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and other advisors warned that Pakistan would view the operation as a violation of sovereignty that could damage the strategic partnership between the two countries. However, intelligence officials argued that notifying Pakistan created an unacceptable risk that corrupt elements within Pakistani intelligence might warn bin Laden about the impending raid. The president ultimately decided that capturing bin Laden was worth the diplomatic consequences of acting unilaterally. The CIA continued gathering intelligence about the compound throughout April 2011, using satellite surveillance and electronic intercepts to monitor activities inside the target area. Analysts noted that residents maintained their unusual security practices, burning garbage and avoiding contact with neighbors. The mysterious tall individual continued his daily walks in the compound courtyard, providing additional circumstantial evidence supporting the theory that bin Laden was hiding inside. Intelligence officers also monitored Pakistani military communications to ensure that local security forces were not planning operations that might interfere with the American raid. Military planners prepared contingency options for numerous scenarios that might complicate the mission. If Pakistani fighter jets scrambled to intercept the American helicopters, the raiders would have support from additional aircraft positioned near the Afghan border. If the compound contained more armed defenders than expected, backup SEAL teams were prepared to provide reinforcement within 30 minutes. If the primary target was not present at the compound, the SEALs would collect intelligence materials and withdraw without engaging in unnecessary combat. The mission required specialized equipment designed specifically for the Abbottabad operation. Helicopters were modified for reduced radar signature to allow them to approach the target undetected by Pakistani air defense systems. The SEALs carried advanced night vision equipment, suppressed weapons, and explosive charges for breaching reinforced doors. They also brought specialized cameras for photographing any intelligence materials they discovered and portable hard drives for copying computer data quickly. Weather conditions and moon phases were carefully considered when selecting the optimal date for the operation. The SEALs needed sufficient darkness to approach undetected, but enough ambient light to navigate safely without using artificial illumination that might alert compound residents. Intelligence analysts also monitored local Pakistani military activities to avoid conflicts with routine training exercises or security patrols that might complicate the mission. Obama made the final decision to authorize Operation Neptune Spear during a National Security Council meeting on April 29, 2011. The president understood that the mission represented an enormous gamble based on circumstantial evidence, but he concluded that the potential benefits outweighed the risks. After nearly 10 years of searching for bin Laden, American forces had their best opportunity since Tora Bora to eliminate the Al-Qaeda leader. The president signed the authorization order and told McRaven to proceed with the mission at the earliest opportunity. The operation was scheduled for the night of May 1, 2011, when weather conditions and Pakistani military activities would provide optimal circumstances for the raid. The SEALs flew from their base in Virginia to a staging area in Afghanistan, where they conducted final equipment checks and received last-minute intelligence updates about the target compound. As darkness fell over Pakistan, the most important special operations mission in decades, was ready to begin. The 40-minute mission that changed history. 2 specially modified Black Hawk helicopters carried 23 Navy SEALs into Pakistani airspace late evening, May 1, 2011, beginning the most significant counter-terrorism operation in American history. The aircraft had been equipped with stealth technology to reduce their radar signature and noise levels, allowing them to penetrate undetected across the rugged mountains of eastern Afghanistan before crossing into Pakistan's tribal regions. The helicopters maintained radio silence during the flight, communicating only through encrypted data links that Pakistani air defense systems could not intercept. The pilots navigated using night vision equipment and GPS coordinates programmed during mission planning, flying at extremely low altitudes to avoid detection by Pakistani radar installations. They followed valleys and ridgelines that provided natural concealment from ground-based observers. The modified rotors produced significantly less noise than standard Black Hawks, though the aircraft still generated enough sound to wake residents in villages they passed during the flight into Pakistan. The SEALs aboard both helicopters conducted final equipment checks and reviewed building layouts as they approached their target. The Abbottabad compound came into view just after midnight as the helicopters approached from the northwest, using surrounding trees to mask their final approach. The lead helicopter, call sign Chalk 1, was supposed to hover over the compound's main courtyard while SEALs fast-roped onto the roof of the 3-story building. However, the aircraft encountered unexpected aerodynamic problems caused by the compound's high walls, which created turbulence that prevented the pilot from maintaining a stable hover. Chalk 1 crash-landed in the courtyard with no casualties, and the mission continued as the pilot managed to bring the aircraft down in a controlled manner that prevented injuries to the SEALs aboard. The helicopter's tail rotor struck the compound's western wall during the landing, causing significant damage that made the aircraft inoperable. However, the fuselage remained intact, and the SEALs quickly exited through the side doors, immediately establishing security positions around the crashed helicopter. The second aircraft, Chalk 2, adjusted its approach and successfully deployed its team outside the compound walls as originally planned. SEALs cleared the building in 9 minutes, moving systematically through the compound room by room using tactics they had practiced extensively during training exercises. The team breached the compound's metal gates and exterior doors using explosive charges that created loud blasts audible throughout the neighborhood. Residents of the guest house, later identified as Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti and his family, were the first people encountered by the assault team. Al-Kuwaiti appeared at his doorway armed with an AK-47 rifle and fired several shots at the approaching SEALs before being killed by return fire. The main building presented a more complex tactical challenge because of its 3-story height and multiple rooms that required simultaneous clearing to prevent armed defenders from flanking the assault team. SEALs entered through ground floor doors and windows, while other team members secured the courtyard and surrounding areas. They encountered Abrar al-Kuwaiti, Abu Ahmed's brother, on the first floor and killed him when he moved toward a weapon. The operators moved methodically through each room, using suppressed weapons to minimize noise that might alert defenders on upper floors. The second floor contained family living areas where several women and children were found hiding in bedrooms and closets. The SEALs used restraint techniques they had practiced during training, securing the civilians with zip-tie restraints while ensuring they were not injured during the operation. One of bin Laden's adult sons, Khalid, was killed on the second floor when he appeared at the top of the staircase leading to the third floor. Intelligence later confirmed that Khalid had been attempting to warn his father about the assault when he was shot by advancing SEALs. They found bin Laden on the third floor and killed him instantly when 2 SEALs reached the landing and encountered the Al-Qaeda leader in the doorway of his bedroom. Bin Laden was unarmed but made movements that the operators interpreted as reaching for a weapon or attempting to use one of his wives as a human shield. Both SEALs fired immediately, hitting bin Laden with multiple rounds. The entire engagement lasted less than 5 seconds from the time the SEALs reached the third floor until bin Laden was dead. Intelligence collection began immediately after the compound was secured, with SEALs gathering computers, hard drives, documents, and other materials that might contain information about future terrorist plots. The operators found 5 computers, more than 100 storage devices including USB drives and DVDs, and dozens of documents written in Arabic. They photographed room layouts and collected DNA samples from bin Laden's body to confirm his identity through laboratory analysis. The intelligence gathering phase lasted approximately 25 minutes as SEALs systematically searched every room in both buildings. The destruction of the crashed helicopter became a critical priority to prevent Pakistani forces from recovering classified stealth technology. The SEALs placed explosive charges throughout the aircraft's fuselage and rotor assembly, ensuring that sensitive equipment would be completely destroyed. The controlled demolition created a massive fireball that consumed the entire helicopter, leaving only twisted metal fragments that provided no useful intelligence to Pakistani investigators who arrived at the scene hours later. Extraction required the second helicopter to carry additional personnel beyond its normal capacity, creating weight and balance challenges for the return flight to Afghanistan. The aircraft crew redistributed equipment and fuel to accommodate the extra passengers, including bin Laden's body, which the SEALs brought with them to confirm his identity through DNA testing. The 40-minute total operation concluded when the overloaded helicopter departed Abbottabad, carrying all surviving team members and their valuable intelligence collection. The mission's success reflected years of specialized training and meticulous planning that allowed the SEALs to adapt quickly when circumstances changed from their original operational plan. Despite the helicopter crash that eliminated one of their primary advantages, the assault team maintained tactical discipline and completed their objectives without suffering any casualties. Confirmation of bin Laden's death came through multiple methods including facial recognition, DNA analysis, and testimony from family members who were present during the raid. The operation that began with 19 hijackers boarding flights on September 11, 2001, finally concluded in a compound courtyard where American forces eliminated the architect of that devastating attack. Within hours, the news would reach the White House Situation Room, setting in motion a chain of events that would reshape global perceptions of American counterterrorism capabilities.